This is the Roller Coaster Podcast, and I'm your host, Lucy Q. Life is a wild ride. It has twists and turns. It's scary, exciting, and downright fun. So throw your head back, arms in the air, and come along with me for the ride.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride.
Okay, before we get started, check out nectargrowth.com. nectargrowth.com. It's free to join, but not for long. Nectar is an extension of the roller coaster. It's where you can start your own journey of self-exploration and growth. In Nectar, you'll find different topics of interest, daily blogs, affirmations, journal prompts, and you can connect with some of the fantastic coaches that have been on the roller coaster. Soon, we'll be adding videos, meditations, live discussions, and events. Our signature course is a journey of self-improvement, and it's valued at $397. But once you join, it's available to you at no cost. So if you're feeling stuck, if you feel like you need to change and not sure where to start with Nectar Growth Network. Come join us. You know you're worth it. Now, let's get on with today's show. I'll never forget the day that we sat in a psychologist's office to hear the results of 8 hours of testing with our son, Ethan. He was just starting grade 2, but we'd known since junior kindergarten that something wasn't clicking when it came to letters and numbers. What we didn't realize was the severity of his challenges. My heart sank when the doctor told us he had dyslexia and he was in the second percentile. So basically take 100 kids with varying degrees of dyslexia and 98 had it better than him. We were painted a pretty grim picture, but what we learned over the following 10 years was that dyslexia isn't a disability, but rather a unique ability. Joining me today is Lois Letchford, who has struggled with dyslexia, and she has also learned to use it as her strength. Now, Lois is a literacy spokesperson for struggling learners who've fallen behind in the traditional classroom. Hi, Lois.
Hello, Lucy. I'm delighted to connect with you.
Oh my God, our stories are so similar. Why don't we start with your experiences with dyslexia and what brought you to being a spokesperson?
I grew up reading words, so I'm old now. I went to school in the 1960s. I survived school because I could read words. I could not comprehend. And not one person ever said to me, this is what you have to do to read. I get tongue-tied, don't I? Because no one ever helped.
Did they not, like, how did they clue in that you weren't comprehending what you were reading? Because somewhere along the line, when we learn how to read, you have to be able to digest what you're reading and regurgitate it.
Obviously, all of the testing that was done was simple and skill-based. I could do the skill-based testing. I couldn't comprehend. And there was obviously very little comprehension questions or very few comprehension questions in the early grades. And only when we got to 5th and 6th grade they started to comprehend. And then I start slipping down the rankings. I'm not doing so well. And no one cared. Because why? Because she's not a very smart little girl. That's why she doesn't do well.
And that's how things were pegged.
Yes.
At that point in time.
No, still today.
It's still pegged. The difference is that teachers are more aware of those situations.
Yes.
And they have formal testing. Like, I don't even know the name of the test that they put him through. It's 8 hours of all these names of tests and what have you. And it's irritating that he has to go through it every few years as if it's suddenly going to reverse itself. As my son said, he's 19 now. He's like, well, if I had my arm cut off, am I going to have to go back every year to prove that my arm's cut off? But they continue to punish. And part of the problem is it's an invisible disability. So you don't see, people can't see. Like my son he's becoming more and more outspoken about what he has and sharing and trying to teach people. And, you know, people don't mean to be hurtful, but they'll say things like, but you look normal.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
And it's frustrating. Now, for you, like you went through it yourself. So you had some understanding of the challenges. But
no, I didn't.
Well, you had an understanding of a struggle and how it didn't work.
That's the only thing. It was only when I'm 39 years old and I'm teaching my son who's 7 that I realized he has problems. And I had this book, little book, that had a list of 20 problems for being dyslexic. I have 18 of the 20.
Oh, geez.
And that's the first time I recognized, this is why I struggled in school. I always thought I was just not very smart. And I still say, you know, I'm stupid. Why do you say that? Because that's what you've heard. That's what you've felt all the way through school. Why don't you get it? Because I'm stupid. It's really hurtful, those inner thoughts, and it's really hard to get rid of them. That's the worst part.
Yeah. And what happened when you were teaching your son how to read?
Well, that was a whole different ball game, because I have to say this. I married very well. I struggled, and I met my husband. We were both in London, both traveling, except I was there on a working holiday and he was there on a scholarship. Anyone from Australia visiting England on a scholarship is the top of the pile. He was in engineering, brilliant at mathematics, and he ended up doing a PhD at Oxford. So he's really smart, and he married me.
Obviously, he's smart for marrying you.
Then we have these 3 children. The first one, it learns at the speed of light. He thinks at the speed of light and talks the same way. In fact, there's no stop between brain and mouth. No impulse control at all. So he learns too fast. The second one looks like he comes from another species. In fact, it's the slowest snail species possible. And that you give Nicholas a direction and he would think about it, and the eyes go to the sky, and he wanders around, and eventually you get an answer back if there's no interruption. That sort of child who struggles so much with language processing is going to struggle in school. And I have to say, what I didn't know about my child was that he had ear infections from the age 8 to 18 months. And I did not realise the implications. So he's got a double whammy. He's got me as his mother, undiagnosed dyslexic. Ear infections limit the hearing of the brain. They change the brain, the way the brain processes language. You lose what you don't have.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there. That's the first time I've heard that ear infections change the brain, because Ethan had chronic ear infections from the time he was 18 months old to he was about 3. Add to that, he was tongue-tied. And for anybody that doesn't know what tongue-tied is, it's that little piece of skin under your tongue. His went to the tip of his tongue, so he actually couldn't move his tongue properly. So the ear infections, as you're saying, you know, may have altered the brain. It also gave him intermittent hearing loss. So
Yes.
He wasn't necessarily hearing properly all the time.
Yes.
Add to that, the poor bastard couldn't move his tongue.
Yeah. Yeah.
God, and it's just like, and it is funny enough, our first son, he was also tongue-tied, but he has very elasticy skin.
Yes.
And it stretched. So
Right.
He didn't have to have it reversed. Ethan, we had no clue he was tongue-tied. Liam was diagnosed in the delivery room.
Ah.
Ethan, they had no clue. it wasn't until going to the ear, nose, and throat doctor for his ear infections that I said to him, I'm like, can you check under his tongue? I think he's tongue-tied. So he was like 2 by the time he had that fixed. He had actually gotten to the point, and I call this intelligence. He had gotten to the point, he had created his own language.
Yes.
We knew it. His
Yes.
older brother knew it. Nobody knew what he
Yeah.
was talking about.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting that you're tying in that ear infection component into dyslexia, because that's the first time I've heard the two connected.
It's not, I mean, dyslexia is a language problem. It's understanding language on top of everything else. One of the things that's really significant. The book that really brought this home to me was 30 Million Words. The author's name has just flown out my head. The lady who does it is ear, nose, and throat special. No, she's not. She does hearing
Audiologist?
Hearing implants.
Oh, okay.
Implants in children. And she said, it's not the implants that make the difference. Yes, sorry, that's a lie. The implants make the difference. What allows a child to succeed after that, once the implant's there, is the number of words a child hears, because the child then got to hear it and get it into the brain.
Okay.
What happens when a child is born is that, they're born with a full brain, and you've got all these neurons everywhere. The neurons that are used get strengthened, and those pathways get strengthened. The neurons that are not used, if you're not hearing, drop away. They don't build up that growth pattern. It's significant. And when I was reading about this, it said it actually only takes 6 ear infections, 1 ear infection a year for 6 years to create a learning disability.
Wow.
It's not very much. And when I was speaking to an audiologist, she said it's not only that the child doesn't hear when the ear is fully blocked, but you have distortions of sound before and after. So it's for a longer period than we recognise that our children are sick.
Yeah.
All, the language. And then, we've not only got the language, but as you say, the articulation problems that come because you're not hearing it properly. And that also impacts reading and writing and learning.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was just a perfect storm.
Yeah.
Perfect storm. And I mean, his junior kindergarten teacher, he started in mid-September. And I would say by early December, she sat me down and she said, I've been teaching for a long time. She goes, I can't tell you what, but something is not right. That was the first time. And thank God she said that to me. Thank God she said that to me. And she said, there's nothing we can do until he's grade 2. There's no testing until grade 2. So she said, if you can, by the time he's hitting grade 2, get the testing. She says, get on the list with the school, but the wait list is a mile long. So if you can afford to, or if you have health coverage, get it done by the time he's in grade 2. And that's what we did. We had to pay out of pocket. Because for all people think that we have free health care in Canada, no, we don't.
A lot of things upset me about that. Our story is a little different in that Nicholas appeared to be okay in preschool, right? We lived right next to the university. We're the closest school to the university. Our school spoke 38 different languages because everyone's coming, PhDs and master's students from all over the world.
Gotcha.
And the kids go to school. So who does Nicholas play with? All the non-English speaking children. What's their language? Non-verbal cues.
Yeah.
So he looks to be doing okay. And the preschool teacher said to me, He'll be fine in school. And we had testing done in preschool and it came out on the middle. He'll be fine in school. He'll be right in school. He goes to school in grade 1. On day 6, the grade 1 teacher says to me, well, you know, he's so far behind, I don't know what I'm going to do with him. He sits and stares into space most of the day. That's when I should have taken him out of school.
Mm.
My little boy was wetting his pants, he was biting his fingernails, he's staring into space, and the teacher is shouting at him. He should never have been put into that situation. And it was acceptable to the school that my son sat by himself every single day during playtime. No one played with him. No one talked to him. Social isolation, social outcast. Disastrous.
That's awful.
Yes.
Ethan was shy. And it's funny because at the same time, the teacher said, she alerted me to this potential problem with his letter recognition. In the same conversation, she proceeded by saying, you know, I love that you come volunteering in the classroom. I love, you know, we don't have many parents that do that. I love your interaction with the kids, but Ethan's not the same when you're there. She says, I'm going to have to ask you not to come back and volunteer anymore, because he lived in a world he didn't understand as a toddler. He clung to me. So going to school kind of forced him out of that. And then when I was there, he would retreat back to safety.
Yeah.
So they didn't want me going because they could recognize that he was pushing himself when I wasn't there. But I mean, the teacher, she did the best that she could with her skill set.
Yeah.
You know, she'd been teaching for 25 years. These types of things were never identified. It wasn't until we got, and that was when we were living in a different province. We were in Ontario then. We had moved to Nova Scotia when we got the diagnosis. And I fought like a madwoman to get him what he needed at school. It got to the point where I laugh because they went through the first session. I mean, we have what we call IPPs.
Yeah.
You know, your individual learning program, because you can't measure kids on the same benchmarks as everybody else. So you have to set up benchmarks that are appropriate for the child. So I think twice a year we'd have to sit down and go through everything and put together a plan. So my very first planning session, I thought everybody sitting at the table was out to lunch. I didn't like what they were saying. And so I called the principal and I lost my nut.
Yeah.
I lost it. And she says, okay, let me ask some questions and I'll get back to you. And she got back to me. She says, I'm going to tell you right now that for Ethan's entire education, as long as I'm at this school, I will manage his learning with you.
Right.
And I commend her for taking that, because I know how aggressive I can be when it comes to my children, like any mother is. Especially, I think you can be overprotective when you're dealing with a child that has challenges.
Yes. And
it doesn't mean that we didn't have our own fair share of battles constantly in school, as I'm sure you did with your kids. Now you're laughing.
The end of grade 1, Nicholas gets tested because he's learnt nothing the whole year. It shows he can read 10 words, he's got no strength, he's got a low IQ. The fact that my child shut down in the testing is irrelevant. He just, I'm not doing this. You know, and I could see Nicholas, just puts his head down and turns it away. That's it.
Yeah. Do you blame him?
That's right. The next year, you know, my husband's now a professor. My husband has study leave in Oxford, England. And I decided to take Nicholas on myself. And I take a series of books with me, Success for All, that were an abject failure. Too many letters, too many sounds, he couldn't do it. My mother-in-law was with me and she said, Lois, put away what's not working and make learning fun. So I'm there saying, what do I do now? I've got nothing. This is 1995. There's no internet. And I thought, what can he do? He can rhyme words and he can see patterns. I started to write simple little poems. Transformation in our classroom. Instantly. Because I am reading to him. So you're reading the whole poem, then you find the rhyming words, you're having fun with it, you're repeating it, you're creating the image, we're working out how this works. And that day was just a huge success. And the next day and the next, every day I had a new poem for him. The double O sounds come up, as in Cook, Look and Book.
Okay, yeah.
I wrote a poem about Captain James Cook. Captain Cook had a notion there's a gap in the map in the great big ocean. He took a look without the help of any book, hoping to find a quiet little nook. As Nicholas and we were, we're seeing things all the time in England. It's a new place for us and it's full of history. And we see this map of the world from 1550 and I looked at it and said, Nicholas, look, there's no Australia. There's a gap in the map. We started to look at what knowledge Cook had in 1770 when he left the UK. And while we're doing this, Nicholas says to me, and who came before Captain Cook? And I said, oh, that's easy, Nicholas. That would be Christopher Columbus. And he said to me, and who came before Columbus? And I'm floored. A, I'd never thought of it. B, I didn't know the answer and I had to search for it. And this is not a question that comes from a child with a low IQ.
No.
I needed to see that. I needed to see this brain that was thinking and phenomenal and everything else. I also had a book to help him learn to decode. But doing the poetry first put me in a world of exploration and tapping into his curiosity and having fun with learning and. And then the decoding was all hands-on. Simple, simple, simple. Short vowels, consonant blends, short vowel only. Brilliant stuff. Work with Nicholas. And it's given me a real foundation for how I teach other students. Go back to Australia, see the lady who'd done the testing, and I say, this is what's happened. And here's me so excited. My kid can learn. Puts her hands on her hips. Well, I've spoken to the reading teacher and he's gone backwards. In fact, he's the worst child I've seen in 20 years of teaching.
Oh, good God. Oh, and that's, oh my God. And that's when when you're presented with a teacher like that, and I understand that they're saying those things based on what they know. I get that. But the very premise of being a teacher, choosing to be a teacher, an elementary school teacher.
No. Diagnostician, the one who does the testing.
Oh, that was the one that did the testing. Oh, well. She needs a new career.
Needed.
Holy smokes. I thought you were talking about a teacher.
No, the one who did the testing said that.
Said that he's the worst one. And what, he had no hope? She had no hope for him?
It was really good wording because I went home and I thought about it. And because I'd had this positive experience with Nicholas, I was able to come back to school and say to her, you can call him whatever you like, but don't expect him to learn like everyone else. And what that did was had me continue to change the teaching at home. He was learning a little bit in school and I did a little bit at home. So we were learning together and we took the pain away. And that was fantastic. Then this is the really funny bit. The reading teacher. What do? God bless her soul. She sent Nicholas home with the sight words that you have.
Oh, yeah, sight words.
Right? She sent him home with the same 2 sentences she gave every other child in her care. For the word saw, she gave him, I saw a cat climb up a tree, and the second sentence, I saw a man rob a bank. Nicholas pulled that paper out in front of me and he read, I saw a cat. No. I was a cat. No. I had a cat. And then he handed the paper to me. That didn't make sense. Took me a while to work out what was going on. The word saw has 3 meanings.
Mhm.
The teacher has only given one, and an abstract reading, and the sentence that he has never seen, a cat climbing up a tree. We had seen the Gutenberg Bible. We'd seen Windsor Castle. We'd been to York Minster. We've seen Captain Cook's original maps. We have not seen a cat climbing up a tree.
Gotcha.
Nicholas is taking the concrete meaning. He's cutting the cat in half, which is what children on the autism spectrum do. They see the concrete, they fail to see the abstract.
Gotcha.
Where was the failure? The failure lies in the teaching.
Yes.
And that teacher, the reading teacher, who's teaching my son 1-on-1, 30 minutes a day, 4 days a week, could not modify the instruction to meet the needs of the child. Am I angry? Now I'm angry. Now I'm on a roller coaster.
Yeah, I went through something similar when they thought that they could teach him how to read using the reading recovery program.
They can't.
The reading recovery program is great for average readers that need some tweaking. It doesn't work for anything else. And they'd send these little Ziploc bags home every night with his little book that he had to read, that he was practicing in those,
In the classroom, in the group.
the little special help classes that he would go to, and he'd bring this book home. And I don't know who got more frustrated, me or him,
That's
because
the problem,
he
isn't it?
he was reading, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, I don't believe this. I do not believe what I'm reading, what I'm seeing. So I started testing him. I'd say, okay, well, if he can read those words in this book, then he can read these words over here. No, blank. It didn't work. So I called up the school and I'm like, this isn't working. And they start quoting, we're reading recovery and this and that, and it's done all of this. We've seen progress. We've done this. We've done this. And I'm like, no, he cannot read. I'm telling you right now, he is so smart. He knows how to fool you. I said, he has the book memorized because you read it to him.
And yes.
He memorizes it and then he reads it back to you.
Yeah.
He has the book memorized. They're like, no, we teach based on the pictures and this, that. And I'm like, it's crap. It doesn't work.
Well, it's not working for this child.
So finally, I ended the conversation by saying, if you think he can read, pull out an equivalent book that he has never seen before and ask him to read it.
Yeah.
They called me back the next day and said, yes, Mrs. Quigley, you're right.
Yeah.
This is not working. I'm like, great. What are we going to do next?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was that scenario of the reading teacher's failure and the bad, that language of, excuse my stuttering, the worst child ever that pushed me to be a reading teacher. And when I become a reading teacher and I go back to school to do my teacher training again and add to my teaching, I found a paper called Beyond the Deficit Theory, written by an Australian professor called Brian Camborne. And what does it say? When children fail to learn to read, we say, well, look at their home background. We look at this, look at their IQ, look at that, look at the other. That's why the child has failed to learn to read, instead of looking at the teaching, which is exactly what happened to me and my son. And it was only, that combination of having such a wonderful experience in England that was transformative, and then coming back and saying, this is what I have to do.
But once you sort of overcame that hurdle, how was the rest of his education? How did that go?
We're privileged, right? By the time he's in 5th grade, he's reading on a 3rd grade reading level. He's reading, he's writing. Everyone's over the moon. He's exceeded expectations, hasn't he?
Yeah.
He's exceeded expectations. He's reading 20 minutes a night. My husband takes a job in Lubbock, Texas, middle of nowhere. The first thing we do is go to the school and meet with the principal, and we say, Nicholas's history. And she says, I think Nicholas should repeat 4th grade. This means he's repeating for a second time.
Jeez.
And my husband, he doesn't make conflict, but he just says, and won't he be old when he graduates from high school? And the principal goes, oh, yes, that's a problem. But, you know, we've got this middle school class in grades 7, 8 and 9. He can do 3 years in 2. Let's give him longer in the elementary school, and he's new in the school and he's different language and all that. Let's give him longer in the elementary school, catch him up in middle school and be fine in high school. That's what happened. In Lubbock, Texas, Nicholas went from the bottom to the top.
Wow.
In my book, I identify 9 things that happened in Lubbock that would not have happened in Brisbane, Australia. And it was transformative.
Yeah, see, we had an uphill battle because the teachers would follow the rules that they have to because of the law to make sure that he had accommodations.
Yeah.
But when Ethan got to, like, I'm going to say the grade 7, 8 point where he was aware enough to understand what was going on around him.
Yeah.
And that at this point the first couple of years, we didn't tell him that there was anything specific. We weren't sure what to do, but by grade 7, grade 8, he knew he had this thing called dyslexia. And so that awareness made him see how people treated him. And he knew that he was being pushed through the school system.
Right.
Now, I would say for us, his saving grace was also a move because we decided to go back to Ontario for what was his high school.
Yeah. And
it was grade 10 was rough going, and we still had battles with teachers. In fact, I inadvertently got a teacher early retired because they knew that there was a problem with this teacher, but the teacher knew of Ethan's learning disability. I, at the beginning of every semester, be like, who are the teachers? I send them an email. This is who I am. I know you're not going to have time to read that really important report that we spent all that money on because I know how busy you are.
Yeah.
This is what you need to know about Ethan. This is my cell number. This is my email. Ask me a question anytime. But anytime the teacher, Ethan would go to the front and ask the teacher a question, the teacher would make some sort of joke, a lighthearted comment about Ethan needing to ask questions again. And it got to a point where the teacher was doing some other things, and the teacher was getting quite out of control with what he was saying. Behavior that should not be, you know what, if it was a student, it would have been classified as bullying.
Yeah.
And I called up the vice principal, and she wasn't available. And the secretary said, well, would you like to leave a message? I'm like, does she have voicemail? No. Like, okay, this is my message. Please ask her why Mr. So-and-so is causing my son psychological distress. You tell her to call me. And I got a call from the school, and they said, we knew the teacher was sick of teaching and that they're 6 months away from retiring. We just didn't have a parent come forward and tell us. Because it still goes on. Even in elementary school, he had a teacher, the music teacher, made fun of him for not being able to sing the ABC song in front of the entire class. And that was another nasty phone call to the school. Like, it baffles me. Teachers behave that way.
I became a reading specialist. I did well in Lubbock as well, and I'm not going to go there, but I want to talk about what you just said. Nicholas eventually got his PhD from Oxford in applied mathematics. And I thought, now's the time I can ask him what happened in first grade, because I had ignored what had happened in first grade. Once he was through that, I didn't go back. I couldn't deal with it.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah. And I said, Nick, what happened in first grade? Confident, articulate boy, adult, 30. He cried. His tongue went around and around in his mouth and not a word emerged.
Oh.
That's when I recognized that the trauma had been done in that first grade classroom. From there, since then, I've done a YouTube series, When Learning is Trauma, because the trauma is there. It needs to be exposed. Children have got to shift it from their memory, because he went like he was back in the first grade classroom. It's right there.
Like a PTSD.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And it happens, simple things, just like you said then. A teacher asking him to sing the ABC song. Humiliation.
Yeah.
Humiliation. And all of it. It sticks, it lodges in the memory in ways that is not healthy.
Oh,
So
yeah, it goes into the subconscious.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have to deal with it. We have to help our kids deal. Like trauma, PTSD. So that was really difficult. And then I asked him, well, what happened when you and I learned together in Oxford? And you had this switch goes flip, and he's laughing. And he named the poems I wrote.
Oh.
25 years later, he named the poetry, the same one. A lot of the stuff we were doing when we did the illustrations was 3D. So that was all fun for him, and he remembered it all. And he said, and I remember the mapping. He said, well, the mapping taught me to love learning, and I never want to stop learning. It was just so much fun to learn. Then he started to giggle. And it was a real 7-year-old giggle bubbling up. And he said, you wrote a poem about a witch's spell. I said, I did. And he said, oh, that was just so funny. I don't remember the ingredients, but we wrote the ingredients, and it was hilarious. 25 years after the event, he's still laughing about the witch's spell that we wrote.
Yeah.
What's interesting to me about that was in my book, Reversed, a memoir, I didn't write about it. You won't find anything on a witch's spell because I deemed my poem too poor to put out in front of people.
Wow. But look what your poem did for your son.
I ignored his reaction and the long-term learning that went on from it. The goal of my poem was to learn the SP words, spin, spot, spell, spit, spun.
See, and that's the difference between when your son went through school and when my son went through school. They have abandoned phonics. In this country, at least where between the two provinces we've been to for education, they don't teach phonics anymore.
Well, it's not even
SP sound. You don't learn. I don't even know how they teach kids how to learn how to read. Ethan taught himself how to read. I got to the point where they would send home and they would want me to do all this reading homework with him. And I refused. I said, no. I said, my son goes to school, and I said, he spends 6 hours a day working 3 times as hard as any other kid in that classroom. This home is his safe place. And this place is his comfort. He is not doing any of that shit at home.
Good on you.
And I said, if he never learns how to read, well, he's going to figure out life. We got enough technology going on these days. He doesn't need to know how to read. He learned how to read because he loved video games. And he had to learn how to read certain things for video games. I mean, I don't know what video games, I don't know how much reading goes into Call of Duty or whatever he plays, but that
more than you realize.
Yeah, but more that was for him. That's what made the connection. And I'm like, dude, if you want to sit in your room and play video games for 2 hours, you go for it. If that is what is engaging and challenging you, you do that.
I have a number of pictures, but this one won't show up. I've just been sent this paper. This one won't. It won't be clear, most likely. No, it's not clear. It's not coming up.
Yeah.
But this one, because I now teach the most vulnerable kids, like your boy, before we even get to letters and sounds, we have to engage children. And that's what we haven't recognised. And that's what I did to Nicholas. I had him engaged along with teaching reading and writing.
Well, that's because now, like, now we stick kids in school at 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah.
It varies between provinces. In Ontario, you do junior and senior kindergarten,
Yeah.
where you're half days, it's
Yeah.
sort of playtime.
Yeah.
But in Nova Scotia, you start school at what they call primary. You're 5. You're
Yeah.
sat at a desk all day. I know. I'm like, what in God's name are you doing putting a child at a desk all day? They should be painting, playing in sand, and eating glue.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
every kid does that.
Yes. I've done a lot of work now. My last talk that I did was on the 3 E's: experience, emotion, expertise. The experience that we have as children in learning to read is dependent upon the experience the child has. If you have no experience of a cat climbing up a tree, it becomes isolated, abstract, irrelevant fact. Hard to recall, hard to remember, impossible to recall, devoid of interest, and takes an inordinate amount of attention to be learned. However, when you change the teaching around to make it experiential, to make it something that the child enjoys, and above all, if it's funny, learning happens with no effort at all. That applies across the board.
But that's how our educational system should be. Our system is so broken. Our current educational system was designed to train human beings to follow bells, follow rules, and punch clocks. That is what our educational system does. It spits out people. It comes from the 19th century when they wanted people to finish school and then go work in the factory.
Bit more, bit lower than that, bit more than 19, before 19.
19.
18.
18. But that's what it is.
You're absolutely right.
And
absolutely. And what do we want? Do we want robots? The problem is my husband's a
the government does.
in engineering. They don't want us to think. Why did we get a Trump? Why has England got a Johnson? Whoops.
People can't think.
People can't think.
Because we were never taught to think. And I mean, this is something that I get into in other podcasts, is I was never even, nowhere along the line did I even learn that I could make choices in my life. And I had to, and I know it sounds silly, but you have the ability to dream and to live out those dreams. And that's up to you to pursue.
Yes.
But that's exactly what schools kill. And it wasn't for Ethan, it wasn't until he got into high school and he got into, he started off taking, I think it was drama, which led to a couple of more art classes that he did. And he got into film and photography. Now his older brother is into film.
Yeah.
And my husband is a creative director, does graphic design, photography, illustration. So it's there in the family. But Ethan was able to attach himself to something. Yes. Ethan graduated on time with a couple of awards.
Yeah.
He just finished his first year of university, living on his own in a different province from his parents. First year, graduated, Dean's List. It's like we need to stop labeling and categorizing children and go back to those 3 E's that you said, that experiential learning. That is what is going to give our kids the ability to tap into their core essence.
And if you think about it, if I'm reading a book about a horse, for early readers, for 5 and 6 year olds, if I'm reading a book about a horse and I've never seen a horse, I've never touched a horse, I've never fed a horse, I've never done a thing to it, it's something that happens in a book. I've really got no idea about anything. Yet if I live with horses and I have to feed them and do that, I've got a totally different understanding of that text. And we forget that cultural appropriateness and what the child is doing is critical. That's the experience. And we haven't dealt with that. If you read it in a book, and I get a bit frustrated that we are so narrow. All you have to do is read these words, read it and comprehend it, or answer the questions, and we've got it. It's not that simple.
No, it's not.
You know,
I mean, look at any adult. I mean, if that was the case, you could give an adult any book and they'd be able to read it, no problem. But you and I both know we can pick up a book, and some books you just struggle to get through because you're like, I'm not getting this. I'm not connecting with this. But then you find the book that whatever the story is, fiction or nonfiction, and you can devour it in a matter of hours.
And you're talking fiction and nonfiction. You haven't even got onto subject matter. Because if you've got subject matter of engineering or medicine or something else, that's a whole different language. Mathematics is a whole new language.
Yes.
It's why drama early on is so important. You turn the book from being something that happens in a book to a real life experience.
Play. Yeah. Learn through play.
Yeah.
And we take that away from our kids.
Yeah.
Oh. Oh my God, Lois, we could talk for hours, but
I'm glad your son is doing well.
Oh, thank you. And your son, PhD, Oxford. That's amazing. Yeah. I hope he went back to the teacher and said, how do you like them tomatoes?
We went back to his third grade teacher, the one that we loved, and told her, and the deputy principal was still there and told her. And he met, we told the ones we loved. I wanted to see his fourth grade teacher, but I can't find her.
I found that first teacher of his that sat me down. I finally found her when he graduated, and I said, I thanked her. I said, what a difference that little thing that she did, what a difference it made in his life, because now we had something to go on. We knew. And I said, and he's graduating on time from high school and he's going to college.
I've got a comment to make. One of the principals, after we've had this incident, worst kid ever, and I saw a cat, I went back to the principal and I said, this is not acceptable that we can't teach his kids to read. And the principal said to me, we can't teach everyone to read.
Oh, please.
We can't teach her.
But you know what? It's not a case of teaching everyone how to read. It's teaching everyone how to learn. That's what we should be focused on. How to learn. If you're interested in something, how do you learn about it? Forget reading, forget math, history, science, forget all of that. What are you interested in and how do you learn about it?
Yeah.
Everything else will come.
Yeah. You and I should be running this.
Well, you call me. You know what? I want people to connect with you. So what is the best way for people to connect and learn more from you?
I have a website, loisletchford.com. I have my resources on there. My book is an audio book as well. It's an abridged version, but it's available on audio. The ebook is on my website as well. Otherwise, you can go to Amazon and find Lois Letchford or Reverse to Memoir. I have a YouTube channel where I put things up. I read to kids. I find that's an easy way to connect, and I've read some fun books. I'm currently going through scientists or people who changed the world and just reading snippets on them. So you find
What about your poems?
My poems, I've read some poems. I read poems on the website.
The ones you wrote?
They are on my website.
Perfect.
Not all of them, just the better ones. Better. And LinkedIn, I'm available on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Well, if you're looking at connecting with Lois, make sure you check out the show notes. I'm going to have all of her links in there. And please, if you're a parent struggling with a child that has a learning disability and you need someone to talk to, you need somebody to connect with, please reach out. I know Lois would talk to anybody that comes her way. Me as well. I get it. It's a hard thing to go through as a parent. You feel lost. You have your own struggles that you're going through. You don't have to do it alone. There are other parents out there. Please feel free to reach out. And Lois, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your story today.
Thank you, Lucy. Love it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Roller Coaster Podcast. Want to chat or share your ideas about today's show? Pop me an email at hello@therollercoasterpodcast.com. Don't forget to connect with me on Facebook and Instagram at The Roller Coaster Podcast. Our theme song, Roller Coaster, was performed by The Lucky Setback. Audio editing by the one and only Jeff Quigley of Quigley Creative.
Love